Go ahead, Jay.
Welcome to a live edition of the DFO Rundown, episode 364, brought to you by Bet365. Use the promo code NATION to get in on a wide range, any sport, anytime. The game's alive at Bet365. And we are now just under 30 hours to the NHL trade deadline. I'm Jason Gregor alongside Frank Seravalli. And Frank, I guess let's start with the big news. Of course, you've been talking about this for a while, but Mikko Rantanen and the Carolina Hurricanes, Rantanen's camp told them, we're not comfortable yet to sign a contract extension. So the Canes are now going to say, let's weigh the options on if a return would be better than risking him leaving in the summertime. What do you think unfolds over the next 30 hours?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, and it's been described to me as a true toss-up. Now, sources indicate that the Carolina Hurricanes have multiple compelling offers already on the table for Mikko Rantanen, and they've got, as you said, more than 24 hours to have those beefed up a little bit, best and final. So I think it's, obviously nothing that they would do just yet that's been accepted. But here's the thing. I think this has shifted pretty dramatically in the last day or two. And it's not necessarily because of the non-answer that they've gotten from Mikko Rantanen. It's because there's other teams that are comfortable playing the rental game quite clearly that's making the Carolina Hurricanes think. So the way I would size up the situation is the Carolina Hurricanes are in the ultimate position of power. You can either have someone come in and knock your socks off and trade Rantanen, or you can keep what we have been saying on this pod for literally years, a game breaker that you needed to go out and get for a playoff run that, by the way, seems to set up, at least right in the moment, quite favorably. The first round matchup for the Carolina Hurricanes right now is home ice advantage with the New Jersey Devils, who don't have Jack Hughes.
Yeah.
And then if you beat the Devils, who we still don't know what New Jersey does between now and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, but let's say you get past the Devils, then you get the Caps in round 2 if the Caps win. If that's your path and it's Devils, Caps, would the Canes actually be favored against the Caps? I think they might be. So you've got a path to potentially a conference final appearance again. And you've got this guy that you not only made a significant deal to get a game breaker, but you finally have Mikko Rantanen. It's going to have to be a really powerful offer for them to turn that down, that opportunity, which, by the way, you could maybe along the way, after the playoffs are over, convince Rantanen to stay. It's not no, it's just not right now.
Yeah, and it is important to remember Rantanen, what makes him even more attractive now is that he's a 4.625 cap hit, right? Like Chicago's got the other part of it. So that to me makes him even more compelling, which means you might get a bigger return, but is it worth it? And it's going to be fascinating to see how Carolina maneuvers this, what teams are willing, because I would think you'd have to give a pretty substantial offer, getting a few, draft picks. I don't think is enough for Carolina. It weakens their team, right? Like they're looking, if the only way I can see this trade unfolding is if they're getting legit NHL players back in return. I just can't see it doing for draft picks that help them down the road.
That's why I think the Canes have to do some serious soul searching here, because if you are getting futures back, like what's the message that you're sending to Jacob Slavin and Sebastian Aho and the rest of the team, which is, we're not really trying to win. We're just trying to have a good collection of prospects here to keep this thing going and remain somewhat competitive. Do you want to be somewhat competitive, or is the goal and aspiration to win a Stanley Cup? And that's really the true delineation here for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think some might say this is an unenviable position to be in. I think this is the ultimate position of power. I really do. Because they're in a no-lose situation. Either you're getting a gargantuan deal that makes you move off of Rantanen, or you're getting one of the best forwards of his generation, a first ballot Hall of Famer in his prime for a Stanley Cup playoff run, which is That's why you traded for him. You knew when you made the deal that there was a chance that you might not re-sign him. This is it now.
Yeah. Well, I think there'd be lots of other teams interested for sure if indeed they end up wanting to take a deal. So that's obviously the big story. The other one, of course, involves a pretty good player, Frank, that came down yesterday after crashing into the end boards earlier against Vegas. New Jersey announces that Jack Hughes is done for the season. Shoulder injury, won't return until training camp. And the Devils, you mentioned they're in third place, but they're only 4 points up on Columbus. You know, they're only a few points up on the Rangers. All these teams below them have games in hand. Even if they get caught by Columbus, they're not out of the woods for the wild card race because there's 6 teams there. I'm fascinated to see what New Jersey does now that they've lost Jack Hughes for the rest. Like, they were probably looking to add a player. Now they just lost a huge piece of their team. This really kind of potentially changes it. And does Kovacevic get in play? Like Jake Allen, if teams are looking for a goal. Like, I wonder what they would consider doing, if anything, now in New Jersey and how it maybe changes.
So I'll tell you first what I think they're going to do, and then I'll tell you what I would do, because I think they're two different things. I believe they're going to remain aggressive. I think this only heightens their need for a center. I think if they were thinking maybe, this is not the player, but the tier of player. If they were thinking maybe Scott Laughton, now they need to be thinking more Brock Nelson, if that makes any sense. You need a better center. So that part I think is still certainly in play. And I think that they now having that LTIR space, they've got lots of flexibility to do something and take a bigger swing if they wanted to. But I think the best play here would be a cautious approach. I don't think the New Jersey Devils are in the same spot as the Carolina Hurricanes or some of these other teams, Tampa, Florida. First off, I don't think they're as good. Second, I think that this is a year that just it hasn't added up. I watched the last not just 6 weeks, but I watch the New Jersey Devils since Christmas, and they're not doing it. Like, they're not putting it all together. They've not been consistent. They've had the good fortune of having extra games played and points in the standings that has made their spot, to your point, seem like there's more cushion there than there really is. And I think the Devils are not that far apart or separated themselves from the group of the mushy teams in the East to be a true contender. So unless you're getting someone either with term or someone that you could re-sign, I think the best play for the New Jersey Devils is a cautious approach. Like, don't be nefarious. Don't sell off. You're not trying to cut the legs off of your playoff chase. Don't trade Kovacevic, but don't go out and spend future assets that you could use later to just make sure that you get to you're likely, math says you're going to get to the playoffs either way.
Yeah, potentially. You're right, though. New Jersey has, they've had more games played than everybody all year. And so, if you look at points percentage rather than points, that they haven't been as comfortable as maybe the point total had looked all season long. And, even with Jack Hughes's game, I don't think has been at the level where New Jersey would have liked it to be this season. And losing him, though, that's a devastating loss. You're right. Like, hey, Scott Laughton ain't replacing him. And they probably wanted Laughton even when they had him. So Brock Nelson is, the best available center. I think he's going to be sought after by a lot of teams. And, I always wonder, certain teams, Frank, like, trading to your rival, there's some risk sometimes where your fan base sees one of their favorite players on that team. And if they go on a deep run, and who knows, like, let's argue and say that New Jersey won the cup, and Islander fans are watching Brock Nelson hoist the cup as a Devil. I think it just, like, throws salt in the wound. I always wonder if certain teams just are like, I'm not trading that guy to like one of our fiercest rivals.
I mean, first off, there's the Devils connection with Lou Lamoriello. I doubt there's any ill will. Two, from a lifestyle standpoint, it's a commute, but
it's
for those guys, it's a hugely beneficial trade that they don't have to move their families. So and Kyle Palmieri, for instance, we've talked about this, is from New Jersey, so and played for the Devils. So I think there'd be a ton of comfort there. I was just checking on the playoff odds while you were talking, and New Jersey has an 86% chance to make it, according to the model at hockeyviz.com, which I think
does that change? I wonder, how does that model impact the injury from Hughes?
I don't know if it does or doesn't. That said, I still think the model's probably pretty accurate. Like, I think New Jersey probably has enough talent superiority compared to some of those other teams in the mush that they still have a very likely chance to make the playoffs, which takes me back to my point, which is don't cut the legs off your chance. Like, you don't need to go the other way and sell, but you don't need to make the big splash unless it's someone that you have under team control.
Well, speaking of big splashes, Frank, Tampa Bay, Julien Brisebois does it again, goes out and moves Mickey Eyssimont, 2 first-rounders, a second-rounder, the second in 2025, first in 26 and 27, brings back Yanni Gourde, and then Oliver gets Oliver Bjorkstrand, really fills out their top 9 forwards. Their top line was great. You know, that their second line was pretty good with Cirelli and Hagel, and now you bring in those 2 guys. We saw Seth Jones go to Florida earlier. Those are 2 teams, you know, really loading up, which leads me to Toronto and Washington. Washington's been very good. We all know they need a third-line center. How do you see the Leafs and the Capitals approaching these next few hours before the deadline? And do you think the urgency, because of what Tampa and Florida did, increases in those 2 cities?
It does, and it will. I don't know that you should be making or judging your team and the moves you make on a reactionary basis by what your competitors are doing. But I can't imagine that it doesn't impact.
Yeah, it has to play a factor.
Right. I think these are 2 totally different scenarios, by the way. We've never gotten a sense that Washington is going to be aggressive, whereas Toronto, I think, wants to be aggressive. And I have zero doubt that Toronto is on the list of teams that are talking to the Carolina Hurricanes about Mikko Rantanen. I'm for sure that's the case. Don't know how they pull it off, but that's another story for another day. And in fact, I'd have a lot of questions about teams and their ability to pull it off to get Rantanen. Like, what are you sending that makes Carolina better right now that interests them? Like, like we talked about, it can't be for futures. So, look, Toronto at the end of the day, is looking for a center, and Rantanen obviously is not that. So those 2 things don't necessarily jive. But when you look at the center market and how it's shaped up, like, I think it changed drastically with the Yanni Gourde deal. I just think he was probably the second best available, and you see the massive return that Tampa pays to get him back. That puts Brock Nelson right at the top of the list, and I think Toronto has monitored that. I'm still very skeptical on Braden Shen. Now, I will say that the Luke Shen trade to Pittsburgh really caught my attention, because on the surface, this is arguably the dumbest hockey trade that's been executed in the last 25 years. These 2 teams that are so far out of it shouldn't even be allowed to call each other when it gets to the trade deadline. I'm not even kidding. And then you trade Michael Bunting, who's out with an appendix surgery and not playing for the foreseeable future. And all of these guys have term, every single one of them in the deal. So Michael Bunting for Tommy Novak. So on the surface, you go, what are they doing? These are not needle movers for either of these teams. There's salary being moved. There's term. There's families being uprooted 5 weeks before the end of the season for 2 non-playoff teams. And then you go, Kyle Dubas, his best friend, arguably in the NHL among GMs. If it's not Ron Francis, it's Doug Armstrong. And then you go, oh, Doug Armstrong has Braden Shen. Could Kyle Dubas either do a Shen deal in conjunction with Armstrong, or is he trading Luke Shen to St. Louis to then send somewhere else like Toronto? It just raised the speculation of it, I think. And now, while Pittsburgh says they're interested in the character, and obviously he traded for Luke Shen previously, so I take that at face value, but definitely a head-scratching move. And so go back to the original premise with Toronto was, are you trying to get both Shen brothers in one deal?
See, it's funny. I actually think that's a good trade for Pittsburgh. right? Like you get Schenn for another year's quality person. And I think Novak has better long-term upside, right? Maybe the timing of it's off, but hey, if a team's willing to do it, I actually don't mind that trade for Pittsburgh.
Well, but I'm saying, so at the end of it, like, so if what you're left with, if you're Pittsburgh and you don't keep Schenn is Tommy Novak, then I get it. You traded to get Tommy Novak and facilitate a Schenn deal. But my next question would be, why right now? Like, what, like, you could have done that in the summer. What's the point of doing the Tommy Novak deal now? What was the impetus to pull the trigger on this on March 5th, as opposed to June 3rd?
Maybe you're worried that if you don't acquire Tommy Novak, someone else jumps the gun for you. If you like the player that much, maybe just do it.
I don't know. I don't know that anyone's jumping the gun.
It is odd. We don't see it very often. That's fair. But
on paper, like I said, on paper, arguably the dumbest hockey trade we've seen in a long time.
See, now the Capitals, we talk about a Scott Laughton. I know he is out there. I give him credit for his last dinner picture. I thought that was quite humorous that he did. But he, to me, seems like the perfect fit for Washington. You mentioned Washington doesn't have to go, like, they're not going, loading up their gun. They don't have a lot of weaknesses. They got a really solid, deep team in Washington. But man, I think he's an ideal third line center for them.
I agree. He was my trade deadline matchmaker. I sent him to Washington. And I think also the Caps getting Ryan Leonard and inserting him into their lineup for the playoffs. Like, yes. I think that's going to be another huge acquisition. I've said this before, and I don't want to sound like I'm down on the Caps. I'm a huge believer in Spencer Carberry, and I think their team has played really well. In this moment in time, I think they've been tremendous. But to me, they look like a team that everything's going right. They're having career year after career year after career year. They remind me of the Seattle Kraken from 2 years ago.
Wow, the Kraken fourth. Yeah, well, the Kraken might have had the most productive fourth line ever when you look at it that season. But
Dylan Strome is on track for how many points?
Yeah.
I mean, all these, and like you, I'm a believer in Protas, and I like McMichael and all, like, all.
I've always liked Dubois. Dubois is like, he's a 60-point guy again. That's what he was before.
And not a good look for the LA Kings. Like, no, it just isn't. That said, like, are all these things going to repeat again next year? I guess that's not really the issue, but it is at the crux of how aggressive should the Washington Capitals be? You've got this incredible pipeline moving forward. You've obviously drafted really well. Your team has mojo. Like, do you want to mess with any of those parts of it that may ultimately or not impact? Like, I don't think this is a very strong market. So you mentioned Laughton, and I think there is, it's obviously Mikko Rantanen, super, super elite. Then you've got Brock Nelson, good player. I just think there's a huge drop off after that. And I think teams have recognized that when it comes to Scott Laughton, that there's been breathless reporting on Laughton in recent days. I was told 2 weeks ago, the first team to put a first round pick on the table for Scott Laughton gets him. And if the offers were so good, let's again, big brain this for a second. If the offers for Scott Laughton were so good, he would have been held out of the lineup already. It's just fact.
Yeah, no, that's true. All right. And man, he's been on the market, it seems, for a year and a half and never been moved. So maybe they don't want to move him that bad, or maybe there's never been an offer. But I do agree with you. Like, I think adding one guy to Washington gives you a little jolt. I don't think it would ruin the chemistry in the room or anything that bad. Obviously, there'd be a few guys who would see some minutes reduced a bit, but we've seen teams, make one addition that could really help them down the stretch. And that's what I think they do. Toronto's fascinating to me. You mentioned Rantanen, but what if they don't get Rantanen? Like, do they go really hard for Brock Nelson? What else do they do? They are getting Tanev back here on the blue line. So that's a big boost for them. Like, Toronto's one where, like, Matthews hasn't been Matthews all year long. We know he's been dealing with the nagging injury. And, if he gets healthy for the playoffs, how much better does that make them just, internally, right? I wonder about that, because anybody who watches Toronto all year long knows they've been doing really well despite Matthews. And not that he's just not healthy. I think we can see that. He's got a nagging thing, but maybe, it gets a little bit better as the season goes along. And if that happens, You know, we've said it all year long. Everybody knows in Toronto, they're going to be graded on what they do in the postseason for sure. So,
and I think that's the conundrum, right? Because I think this Leaf team is the best version of this Leaf. That's the ironic part about Matthews having, for his high standard, a relatively disappointing year. You would agree, right, that their goalies are the best that they've been. Their defense is the best constructed defense that they've had with Tanev and Ekman Larson. That they've got the best version of themselves for the last 6 years, and yet Florida's loaded up, Tampa's loaded up. What do you do next?
Yeah. Well, that's why I think like Brad Treliving, if I had to rank like teams that, you know, need to make a big move, Toronto's right near the top, and they're good, but their division, Frank, Florida and Tampa have gotten better. Like no one can argue that. They've gotten better. And Tampa Bay, the wild card with them is this is the most rested they've been for a postseason in a while. And Vasilevsky is healthy again, and he looks great. Like that's going to be a tough out, man. They're going to be a really tough out. I think first place in that division is huge because you avoid the other two.
Yeah, and look, if you have a Tampa, Florida first round, I mean, that's going to be an all-out war.
God, I would love to see it, man. Like just from a fan standpoint of the game, that would be an unreal rivalry. I'd love to see it. Now, and you know, some would argue, hey, I'd like to see it in the third round. Sure. But I could argue I'd rather see it in the first round when they're fresh, and man, they would go toe to toe. It would be fantastic. Let's bring in Ty Yaremchuk. We'll get to a lot of the West teams after Ty.
Hey, what's going on, boys? I got a handful of things to get to, including some questions from the YouTube chat since we are live right now. So you know what? Let's even maybe start there. Someone came in real early, and I hate reading the YouTube names because some of them are so ridiculous. Whipped cream from a cow dropped in. Can you please talk about Buffalo, the most important team in the NHL? So let me make that my first fill in the blank. The Buffalo Sabres will move blank players off their roster before tomorrow, Frank.
I'm going to say one. I'm going to say Jason Zucker, and that's it.
And otherwise, it's quiet?
Yeah, I don't think that they've had much going on Bowen Byram. I don't think they have zero. I think they have zero interest in trading JJ Peterka, although teams have been calling left and right. And I do think he's going to find a way out of there this summer. I think they aren't sure what to do with Dylan Cousins and would like to wait for a full field of teams that could make better offers later. And I think the fact that after all of this year and the way that it's played out, how poorly it's been, that someone got a reward yesterday in Jordan Greenway, 2 times $4 million. Like, I'm sorry. I don't get it. Like, Jordan Greenway has scored 17 goals since he joined the Buffalo Sabres 3 seasons ago.
Yeah.
17 goals. Like, if Jordan Greenway was the size of, pick a random player on our trade targets board, Ryan Donato, he would be out of the league if that was his production.
Dude, $4 million a year. I don't know if you saw the meme that went around about, they made the joke about, and I forget the guy who posted it, saying, you know, Mason Appleton's agent is wondering how, you know, and funny enough, I had Rich Winter on my show yesterday, asked him about that. And literally Rich showed me his phone. Mason Appleton had sent him that meme as a joke saying, what the hell, right? Like it was that contract to me. It just illustrates, Frank, what we've talked about all year long about the Buffalo Sabres. They don't have enough experience in their front office. And to me, it's apparent. Why would, like, JJ Peterka didn't get signed before for this? Like, I don't understand. And I get that they're not hugely in cap issues, but it just, I don't understand it. Hey, good for Jordan Greenway. I never get
I was going to
upset.
say, good for his agents, the Bartletts. Like, that's good agenting. I just, like, after all that, you decide, like, so what? The offers weren't good enough to move him? Doesn't that tell you something?
Yeah, that was honestly, like, I thought it was $4 million total, like $2 million a year. And I'm like, oh, all right. And then I was like, no, $4 million a year.
So contrast that with, okay, so Jordan Greenway goes out and somehow, after barely playing, it feels like, He goes out and he gets a raise. He gets $1 million raise on the worst team in the Eastern Conference. Yet you had Ian Cole and Alex Kerfoot both take pay cuts yesterday with the Utah Hockey Club to stay.
Yeah, Ole Mata's played huge minutes for them, and he got less, right? Like, yeah, Utah signed their whole team, it seemed like, in the last 24 hours.
But why does he get a raise and those guys get pay cuts?
Nah.
I don't know.
Yeah. We got one in over on our Twitter. It comes in. Any Bruins news? Hoping Carlo, Coyle, Zaka, Geeky, and Brazeau are all moved. Frank, come on, they're not moving 5 guys, but what do you got on the Bruins?
They could. I think the Bruins are a fascinating team between now and Friday. I haven't had a chance to do a full update on a trade targets board. Today was just like get the Rantanen news out there this morning with an updated top 40 and move him to the number 1 spot. But Morgan Geeky will be joining the trade targets board later today. I do, and so will Brandon Carlo. I think the Bruins are in a fascinating spot to be able to really weigh what makes sense. Geeky's having a career year, 20 plus goals, RFA status. They're going to need to decide, are we paying this guy or not? I think Zaka is less likely, but I think they should consider everything that comes down the pipe. If someone's calling you today and offering you 4 first-round picks for David Pastrnak, I think you have to think about it. Like the real question is not just can the Bruins be good next year again, which I think they do have the opportunity to do. Jason, who's going to play center to get David Pastrnak the puck and actually make him productive? Because if not, you're wasting years of David Pastrnak.
Yeah, well, if I'm trading past, I'm getting way more than 4 picks. I'd want some NHL players, but Brandon Carlo is the most interesting name for me of all those players. A right shot defenseman who lots of teams are dying for them. They're looking for. There's always a shortage of top 4 right defensemen. I think that's the guy that you could probably cash in on the most if you were interested in doing it, right? They don't have Hampus Lindholm now. We know he's going to be back next year. So, you still got him and McAvoy. Those are pretty 2 good pieces to build your top 4 around. So of all the guys that were mentioned there, that's the one guy, if I was Boston, I think you'd get the most return for.
All right, let's keep cruising here. I really like this one from Klubes. It's not a full mock trade. They put it in our YouTube, but they wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the start of a framework of a deal that is Nazem Kadri and Casey Middlestat. Greggs, what's your first reaction to that? Colorado gets Kadri back, had so much success there. Calgary gets younger. Other pieces would need to be involved, but what do you think?
It's interesting. I look at Casey Middlestat, and I know there was an early bump and people liked him, and now they're all like, it doesn't really fit in. Well, if I'm Calgary, he's younger than Kadri, and he's obviously cheaper, no question. I think Calgary is really trying to slug it out here and make the playoffs, right? And so that might be a better trade in the offseason if I was Calgary, but I think there's some value to them. Like, I know if you make the playoffs, even if you lose in the first round, they're not going to tank, right? So they miss the playoffs by 2 or 3 points. It's not like their draft pick changes very much. So I don't know if Middlestat would help them over Kadri down the stretch. I could see that maybe being a summer deal that they would consider probably more if you're Calgary, and then you have time to rejig. But I don't know if that would benefit the Flames right now at the deadline.
I think both teams would do it right now.
One for Calgary would, eh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, I do. Okay. Only because think about where Calgary's trying to get to, right? They want to be super competitive in the mix when their buildings open. 2027. Okay, so Kadri's under contract through 2029, which takes him to age 38.
That's not
productive now, grinder, gamer, love his compete, love all those things. But you're also talking to a team that won a Stanley Cup with Kadri and knows that he can actually truly deliver on the 2C role that Casey Middlestat can't. So Calgary gets a decade younger. And right now they're kind of putting out the same production level. If you're Calgary, you goes, yeah, sign me up for that. I want the guy who's 10 years younger and at a cheaper cap hit. And if you're Colorado, you're going, hey, I'm trying to win now. I want the guy that I know I can win with, and I'll take the higher cap hit, and I'll figure out whatever happens with that contract on the back end of it.
Yeah, well, the age factor definitely is true there. Yeah, and Colorado, we heard the news about Landeskog. Like he's obviously not going to be coming back before the end of the regular season. So we saw Tampa Bay go back to guys they really like. We've seen other teams do it. So in that theory, it makes sense. I don't know. When you outline Kadri's long term, even then for Colorado, like is Colorado that good to make that trade now, knowing that the pain could be there? That you're not going to have the value in the near the final 2 years of the deal.
Maybe they don't really value Middlestat to begin with.
Well,
or not as much. Just to follow up on Calgary, I did check in this morning in case anyone in the YouTube chat is asking. Sounds like the Flames are not going to be very active as expected. I don't know that they're looking at the market and see many fits. They don't have any takers or fits for Dan Vladar as expected on the goalie market. It's very quiet. And another avenue you could see the Flames get into is the salary retention game, since they've got the most cap space in the league. But I don't, there's many teams competing for that. And you know what it's like. Sometimes it just comes down to the buddy game.
Yeah.
They have two. Tampa's going to call Steve Yzerman to get him involved in the retention game because that's just the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. They have 2 retention spots in Calgary, for anybody wondering, because they got Markstrom for this year and next. So 2 is quite a bit. So they could do it if they want, especially if it's one that just ends at the end of the season. Why not?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of those. That's usually what happens, right, on deadline day. And a lot of teams are willing to do that. But no, like Calgary entered the year with $18 million in cap space and they haven't spent it. So they've got way more than they could ever spend.
All right, let me get a couple more quickly over to you guys. This one came in earlier from Brian Finley's son, who said, what's the temperature around a Jets/Brock Nelson deal? Let me frame it to you this way. If I had you pick, there's 2 buttons in front of you, the Jets or the field for a landing spot for Brock Nelson. Frank, which button would you hit?
I would take the Jets. I think they're ready, willing, able to make a deal. I think he's by far the best fit. I think he's a candidate to re-sign. And I think the Jets have the goods to pay what a team like the New York Islanders would be looking for. And there's no other center available that gets to the level of Brock Nelson that would satisfy the 2C need for Winnipeg. I like Scott Laughton, but I think he's a 3C. And you're not solving your problem if you go Adam Lowry and Scott Laughton. So it's Brock Nelson or bust for me, and if not, I could see Winnipeg pivoting to just a defenseman.
Yeah, Brock Nelson, it's like the ideal fit, and the Jets are good, right? Like we remember they got steamrolled last year. I think they learned from that. That's a tough learning pill for sure. And you look at them. There's neither of those wild card teams, I don't think, concern them at all, who's battling for the number 8 spot, right? Whether it's Calgary, whether it's Vancouver, St. Louis, or Utah, whoever you think is going to get in. Winnipeg is not getting steamrolled in round 1 this year. Mark that down, man. If there's a captain obvious take, to me, I think that's the one. And I agree with Frank. Like, I know Toronto wants him, but the Winnipeg Jets, that's a team who you need to take a page out of Julian Breezebaugh's book if you're the Winnipeg Jets. I think they need to be very aggressive to get Brock Nelson.
All right, I know you guys are going to close off this the live edition of the show by talking about some Western Conference teams. So let me ask you one more about an Eastern team. Andrew Dowler wants to know any players that you think make the most sense for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Greg's, I'll let you get the first word on this one. Who do you like as a potential fit, or maybe just stylistically, where do you think CBJ should add?
Yeah, you know what? Frank talked about it earlier, how, you got the chemistry. There is something right now in Columbus that it's hard to explain. Everybody knows what's happened with that organization, and, the love they're showering, not just from their fan base from around the league to the Gaudreau family. I think it's something that's really galvanized that group. Matthew Olivier gets a huge deal for himself, loyal guy. Don Waddell, I think, understands they want, it would have to be somebody that, as much as we talk about the player, I think the person would be just as important to that team on who they add. I've been trying to think, because Don Waddell, he basically told everybody he wasn't going to trade off. He says, hey, I feel I owe it to the team to look to add, but I don't think it's going to be a big splash guy. So, it's maybe a character guy. I think they probably, I know it's a lame take, but I would say a third pair defenseman. Like Luke Shen, if I'm looking at a personality, that's the guy I would look at, to be honest, but he got moved because that was the guy I thought beforehand. So that's a type of style defenseman. I don't see a big swing from Columbus because they've got so much going right, and they've had so many injuries, guys. Like, look at all the injuries they've had, like excluding them, the passive Johnny Gaudreau just during the season, and they always find to have somebody come up. So when everybody's back, they don't necessarily need a lot, if anything, to be honest. Like, I won't be shocked if they end up doing nothing.
I think they'll do something. I just don't think it's going to be trading massive futures for a short-term fit. But you're right. Tragedy, injuries, it's been one thing after the other. And I think if you're Columbus, you're probably sitting there going, it'd be amazing to get everyone back. But is that even a reasonable expectation based on the way that this year has played out? Just be awesome. You mentioned the back end, like getting someone like Goodbranson back. That is their version of Luke Schenn, right? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
So I think maybe a little more scoring punch would be good, even though the team they had offense coming that I never would have dreamed we'd see from them. And Don Waddell was right. Anytime someone went down, it was Ken Johnson stepping up, Adam Fantilli stepping, like all their young guys, Marchenko, like they just continued to pick up after each other, one after the other. It's been amazing to watch.
All right, boys, there you go. I'll let you guys wrap up with some talk about the West, but that'll do it for our listener-fueled edition of Fill in the Blank, brought to you by Bet365.
And I don't think they're going to add a forward, Frank. Like, you look, Monahan's on IR right now. They just got Shinnikov back, but that it's been a revolving door. And they got Cole Sillinger too on IR. So those two come back, and they've already got 12 forwards that they like. So defense is the only position maybe. Now the other one could be maybe like you wonder about goaltending. If there is, I'm not sure there's one out there like Jake Allen, maybe, I don't know, but that's the thing about goalies. Like, John Gibson left the game last night. We haven't heard how serious that is, but he's been battling injuries off and on for a bit, and he's played very well this year. But Binnington's not getting moved.
I don't think Gibson was an authentic candidate to move all along. The cap hit was a severely mitigating factor. Plus the idea that Anaheim, they still want something of value for him.
Yeah.
If you had any prayer, it's you can take him off our hands and we'll have to work something out for the retainment. But short of that, like, I wasn't seeing the market to begin with on Gibson all along.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Now, let's talk about some of the teams in the West. Let's start with Vegas because they're always interesting. The Vegas Golden Knights, they're never afraid to make a big splash. I would assume, Frank, I'd put them in the list of teams that would be calling on Mikko Rantanen, and I'd be stunned if they weren't. But let's say Rantanen stays, just for argument. What else do you think Vegas is looking at?
I wonder if there's a possibility for a Riley Smith reunion. I think that makes a ton of sense. He's down to 375. He had the money retained from Pittsburgh going to New York. So Vegas, since they didn't retain on him shipping him out, can absolutely reacquire him. And I think if you're in on someone else, like if you're in on a Rantanen and a big ticket item, I think he's just a really safe check down option. He hasn't been super productive this year, but you never know, sending him back there where he's had so much success and obviously left on good terms after winning the Stanley Cup, an original Golden Misfit. I just keep an eye on that. Like, I think that's a distinct possibility. We just saw Yanni Gourde going home. Cup winners and their former teams, like, it's a real bond that never leaves. So I think that's a real possibility.
Okay. We've talked about Colorado, what they're looking to do. The Dallas Stars have a boatload of LTIR space, but I don't know what they're looking, if anything. I would think they would like a defenseman, Frank. Do you think Jamie Alexiak makes sense for the Dallas Stars? And do you think Seattle's interested in moving him?
I do. Well, he's already been there, right?
Yeah.
I don't, because he's a left shot guy, right?
Yeah.
It's the right side.
He can play the right side. I know it's not ideal, but he can.
I know, but I mean, the problem he has term, right? Like, I only see Dallas being involved in rentals.
Okay.
Because they're dealing with LTIR space. They need to re-sign a whole bunch of their young guys. That's why they weren't in on someone like Seth Jones. I mean, they just can't afford to bring anyone in that's going to chew up cap space for next year, which is why when they did go out to get guys, they got Granlund and Ceci, right?
All right.
So I don't see a fit. And that's not to say that they aren't up to other things, but it's two things working against him: term and the fact that he's a left shot guy. Their left side is like as good as anyone in the league. The problem is their right side is somewhere between 27th and 32nd between CC, Lyubushkin, and Dumba. So and the other problem is Dumba and Lyubushkin have term. So I think Lyubushkin's fine as a third pair guy, but they're asking too much from everyone else.
Looking at, we talked about Winnipeg, and if they don't get a center, you think they'll pivot to a defenseman. Edmonton's already acquired Trent Frederick. I think there's an obvious need in Edmonton for a second pair right defenseman. The market doesn't have a lot of them. Alexiak's
really,
right? Like Brett Kulak has played the right side a lot, so they could do that and move him with Darnell Nurse if needed, and then they'd still, I think, want to upgrade, and get another defenseman. And so I look at Edmonton, and I think the Edmonton Oilers are a team that Stan Bowman to me has to be aggressive. I know they don't have a boatload of cap space. Doesn't matter. You got to find ways. They need to improve that. The goalie market, I don't see a goalie market at all, really. So to me, it's you upgrade a number 4 defenseman, a second pair right defenseman. That's 20 minutes a night for your team on a team that still hasn't been as great defensively, especially off of the rush, especially odd man rushes. 5-on-5, they're giving up way too many. They were 27th last time I checked. So I look at the Oilers. Do you see a right defenseman or even a lefty who plays the right side that fits?
Yeah, I see a lefty that plays the right side that fits in Carson Soucy, but I don't think the Canucks are doing the Oilers any favors. And how much does the term on his deal impact the Oilers' ability to add him? I think he's a stylistic fit. He's not a 100% perfect fit, but like Brandon Carlo would be a really good fit out of Boston too. He's a true right shot guy, but he probably makes too much, and the Bruins are going to want too much.
Yeah, well, Carlo's, I think, the guy for sure. Like Connor Murphy, the Hawks can't retain any salary. And I went back and looked, and it's hard to find a team where, they can't retain. So you got to find potentially 2 other teams, to want to do retention before he comes to Edmonton. I guess it's possible. You just don't see those type of trades very often with that much, retention. And then you're giving up that more
much term left, right? Because no team wants to have that on their books as the middleman for multiple years, unless it's really, really worth their while.
Yeah. So.
Here's where I think Edmonton is at. Sources indicated it was pretty quiet in their front office yesterday, that they didn't have much happening. I believe that as they're working their way through this Evander Kane situation, and to my knowledge, still no clarity one way or the other, they're operating under dual tracks of, are we spending Evander Kane's money or are we not? That one of the other things that they're wrestling with is, let's say we have made the decision or we are comfortable going out and spending Kane's money. Who on this market really justifies that risk? Who on this market do we feel is a true difference maker to really improve our team that much to the point where we'd be willing to roll the dice on what is a tenuous situation? I think that's a true way to describe where they're at, that I don't know that they love what they're seeing out there on the defense market for a lot of the reasons we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, if Carlo's out there, would he be enough for you?
He would for me.
Yes, me too.
But it's 2-part problem. It's acquisition cost. What do the Oilers have to give to the Boston Bruins to make them want to say, yeah, we'll punt on a couple years more of Carlo?
Well, that 2026 first round pick, I think, has quite a bit of value. A lot of people love that draft, and I would start there. That would be one. And then obviously you'd have to, you're going to have to shed some salary to make that work, of course. So he'd be a piece. Now, one team, Frank, you look, the Vancouver Canucks have said they're not in the market to be buyers. You talked about the Flames. They're probably not going to do a whole bunch. What about Bill Guerin and the Minnesota Wild? I know they already made one acquisition, but Bill Guerin is never afraid to jump into to a trade. Do you think it's a quiet final few hours for Bill Guerin, or does he make another move? Because he always seems to be making moves.
I think it'll be relatively quiet. Like, I think he's got the goods to be one of those guys that's super aggressive and in the mix. But like, let's just operate on a hypothetical. Okay. Let's say you do want to get in on Mikko Rantanen. Okay. Me personally, watching this Wild team, I don't know that they've gotten to that level yet where he's that guy that puts them over the top. But beyond that, it's really hard to squint and look at their cap table and say, yeah, we know you've got that huge money coming off the books and the buyouts for Suter and Parise, but you have to pay Kirill Kaprizov. And you can start paying him this summer, meaning you can sign the deal. It doesn't hit your books next year, but what happens when it does? Can you afford two players of that pay scale who are both wingers? Can you? I tend to be skeptical of that. So that's where my thought process is on the Wild.
And then what about the Blues, who have put themselves in the mix? I know that they're in the middle of a 6-game road trip that might decide their season. And Utah. Utah went out here in the last few days, Frank, and they've re-signed lots of their guys. Vejmelka, we talked about the defenseman, and Kerfoot that they've re-signed here recently. Could they be a surprise to you? I know they would be in on Rantanen, no question. They would love to get him. But do you see any other moves? Do you see Utah saying, hey, we're close here. Let's try to augment. Let's get in. It's our first year in a new market. We got a competitive team. We don't have to, we don't have to sell the farm by any stretch of the imagination, but they've had some injury issues all year long that's kept them in the mix. Now their defense is healthy. Gunther's back. Do they just say, okay, we'll go with the healthy roster and that's enough? Or do you think they make an addition?
So you started talking about St. Louis and Utah. You're asking about Utah?
Utah, yeah.
Look, I think it's in their DNA. I think it's in Bill Armstrong's DNA to want to be aggressive. I think he's planted seeds and laid foundational groundwork all season long to try and do something big. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition. I would think that they would want to be in on one of those teams in on Rantanen, but same thing. If we don't make the playoffs this year and Rantanen then decides to walk, would Utah really be comfortable giving up? I know they're dealing from an abundance, a surplus of future assets, but would they want to do that knowing the risks? Like, does this fit their risk profile? I would say probably not. I think their deadline is going to be pretty simple. We've got a core group of guys that we really like. Obviously, they just re-signed a bunch of them. And if we can add someone who's a difference maker, we'll do it. We're not going to trade away any pieces, but other than that, what we've got is what we've got.
And the Blues, I know there's been lots of Shen, and they're not moving those guys. I don't see any chance.
I do see a chance, but it's going to have to be for a high threshold, a high bar. Yeah. If someone meets that price of this is what happened with Buchnevich last year. The Edmonton Oilers came very close and were thinking about getting Pavel Buchnevich. But in the end, Doug Armstrong held firm on his price, and that was that.
Got Dylan Holloway later in the summer.
That was one of the guys in the deal. Mm-hmm. So it was two first-round picks or equivalents for Braden Shen plus more to retain. I mean, Gord and Bjorkstrand got that. I think he's fair to ask for it. Will he get it? That's the part I'm skeptical on.
Yeah. I want to go back quickly because there's one team that skipped over.
Wait, by the way, I think needs to be mentioned and reiterated again because it has not been talked about nearly enough. Braden Shen has full no trade protection. He chooses when and where and if he gets traded.
Yeah. One team we didn't talk about in the East, Frank, and you know what? It's kind of been funny. They've traded off some pieces here, and they've actually played better since. And it's funny. So they traded off Lindgren, and Adam Fox has been out of their lineup. They had back-to-back shutouts without him. That they only allowed 2 goals against Washington, 3 against the Caps in a tight play game. What do you make of the Rangers here? They've made some additions, they've made some subtractions. Could they make more additions here? more subtractions? Because it's kind of odd. They're subtracting guys. And I know that it's a little bit of a turtle race in the wild card race, but they're not out of it by any stretch of the imagination with 20 games to go.
No, but I don't think trading Riley Smith is going to change their playoff plans or thoughts or hopes one way or the other. So extract what you can. And short of that, again, they're in the Utah category. If you can get us a difference maker that fits the age range that we're building, of course, pull the trigger. And they would. I think the Rangers would. I think Utah would. But in the meantime, they're not going to go out and add to make sure that they get in. This season has been a roller coaster. Chris Drury's done a lot of the heavy lifting. He traded Jacob Trouba, which, by the way, the Anaheim Ducks have gotten a lot better since he's been there. And he traded Ryan Lindgren, and he's made tough decisions. Traded for JT Miller. But that doesn't mean that he's also, outside of Smith, going to cut the legs off of this team. I think the mission and mandate for New York is very simple. Figure out who's playing on your defense moving forward. Nail that down. If it's Fox and Schneider, great. Is K'Andre Miller part of it? And if he is, awesome. And if not, begin the process to move him. They've done it with Trouba. Zach Jones is another guy I think has a real good chance to be traded by Friday at 3 p.m. They were obviously showcasing him last weekend. Decide who's part of your team moving forward and then build around that.
Hey, you mentioned the Ducks, Frank. I'm telling you, Jackson Lacombe is the defenseman that more people in the NHL start talking about. I saw him firsthand. That kid is impressive. I picked all like the bottom 10 teams. I would take the Ducks as my team. I think has the best chance to move up here in the next few years. McTavish he's a big man who's coming in his own. Cutter Gauthier getting better. Leo Carlson, man, I know he only played the one game, but look at his games. He's got 5 goals. It's somebody told him, hey, Leo, you need to shoot the puck. And he's come back from 4 Nations. He's shooting the puck and he's scoring. And another guy who wasn't there, but the Montreal Canadiens, Frank, they're still, maybe they're too far out, although they're only, a point out. Doesn't seem like it's a lot. Nick Suzuki, 13 points in 5 games since the 4 Nation break. He's the hottest player in the NHL. They've won 5 in a row. Montembeault's playing great. What do the Habs do here? Do they look and say, guys, maybe we got to add? Because they're right in the mix. You can't say they're not. What do they do? Do they subtract?
Unlikely to add in a big way. I think they're interested. Like the Habs are open for business. Like they will make a move if they could get their hands on something of quality. But they are in a spot where if they're trading Savard and trading Armia, totally open to doing so, but they want something legitimate back. They don't need extra picks. So like calling Kent Hughes and saying, I'll take David Savard off your hands for a 4th. Like he's like, at this point, like I'll just keep him.
Yeah.
And same thing with Armia. Like you're probably going to need to put a 2nd round pick on the table to get Yoel Armia out of there. I think there's a few teams that are interested, and I thought he's had a pretty diligent season. I think going back to Winnipeg is a possibility, and that could be in the cards. I wanted to add one quick thing on the Anaheim Ducks and Jackson Lacombe. Think back to the Minnesota Golden Gophers and how that played out. Just remember, it was Jackson Lacombe lugging the big minutes, not Brock Faber at the time. And we all know what Brock Faber has turned into, but just a little preview window and precursor for how special Jackson Lacombe could be.
Really, really good player, man. He's been really impressive for them. And again, I don't want to leave out any teams that are in the mix. The Ottawa Senators, maybe they,
space.
they don't have much. So I don't know if they're going to do anything.
They got to trade a player off their roster. So just tell me who it's going to be, and then we'll figure out what they're going to get.
And then what about Stevie Y? Let's end with the Detroit Red Wings, Frank. They played well, but God, Red Wings fans right now might be having, visions of last year. Remember, they had that great streak, and then they lost 6 in a row and fell right out of the race and missed it by a point. And I know it's only a 3-game losing streak, but they've suddenly lost 3 in a row at the worst possible time.
So let's end it with 2 teams that I think are potentially 2 of the most aggressive teams between now and Friday at 3 p.m. that we didn't talk about. 2 Hall of Fame general managers, Steve Yzerman and Rob Blake. I think the LA Kings and Detroit Red Wings are both feeling the heat. These builds have both existed for too long. The Wings have not played a playoff game in Little Caesars Arena when playoffs in the spring in Detroit were like a rite of passage in the spring. That hasn't happened in Hockeytown, and they need to do what they can to make that right. I think the first step is addressing their defense. Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall. It's been a poor job of talent evaluation on their back end. Simon Edvinsson and Mo Seider, fantastic, and I love what they're building. But those two guys can't carry you into the playoffs and beyond. So they need help on their back end, and they've got a ton of cap space to do it. People were saying yesterday, why on earth would the Red Wings facilitate a deal for their division rival in the Tampa Bay Lightning with cap space? They have upwards of $19 million in cap space. They could not possibly spend it all by Friday at 3 p.m. It's use or lose. You don't get any refunds. So why Detroit wouldn't take a 4th round pick to essentially buy one for cash, it doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't. But Detroit and LA is staring down, as you know, potentially a 4th consecutive first-round matchup with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
They've won 0 playoff rounds in Rob Blake's 8-year tenure, and they got to get moving. Who's going to take this team from good to great? And who's going to be the running mate for Anze Kopitar, who is still unbelievable and has shown no signs of decline? I think they are one of the front runners to land Mikko Rantanen.
Whew. Wow. That would be, hey man, that would add a lot of juice into that matchup, no question. And I think it's fair to say that, the pressure. Now the Kings have been in the playoffs. It's fun. It's kind of different pressure, right? Like the Kings, we've been in the playoffs, but we lost in 7, then we lost in 6, and then we lost in 5. So we've been there, but it's worse. Where Detroit, they haven't had a sniff. And I look at Detroit, they were close. They made the coaching change, and they had an extended run of playing very well. Sometimes you get the coach bump for 10 days or something, but it lasted a lot longer. And Todd McClellan hasn't pulled any punches, in some of their losses. So I don't know how they can upgrade their defense, Frank. I agree they have to. It's just, as we've talked about a lot, the market. So maybe Steve Yzerman's the guy who has to, take a page out of his former organization in Tampa, where, Brisebois is not afraid to, make huge deals. Now, maybe it's a little bit better of an advantage when you have all those Hall of Famer players on your team. But I think Detroit's a team that they can't sit there being this close again, having been in a playoff spot, and then do nothing between now and Friday's deadline. I think that would be a huge fail.
I agree. Let me ask you this. And I don't think they'll do nothing. I think they'll do something. The question is how big. If Mikko Rantanen gets traded, and if it's to the LA Kings, given how poorly the Oilers have played of late, given how poor their goaltending has been for a while, could you smell a first-round upset?
Well, we'll end the stats, Frank, with stat that's probably going to blow your mind. I'll do the Frank. Look, okay. 11 straight games. Connor McDavid has no points 5-on-5 in his last 11 games. That's not happening again, right? Like at some point he'll wake up. That will help the Oilers. You're bang on. Their goaltending needs to be more consistent. I think their team defense does. I'm very curious because to me, Frank, they seem to be a team. They wanted to kind of bring the gang back. There's lots of guys in the gang right now that aren't carrying their weight, right? Like Leon Draisaitl is the one guy who's been super consistent all year long, save for one game. And I think Edmonton, Zach Hyman put it, he goes, unfortunately, we've put ourselves in this situation many times and we've been able to dig out of it. But can you do it again? If they get Rantanen, that would be their best chance to do it, no question. Sometimes I wonder about,
would it even be an upset? Like, I'm not exaggerating based on how poorly the Oilers have played.
Yeah, lately they have not been good. Like they've been the worst team, I think, in the NHL coming out of the break. So they've still got a quarter of the season to turn it around. But to me, I think Bowman, he can't just settle for the Trent Frederick deal. I think he has to do more. And partially now he would have to do even more if they get Rantanen. But I'll say this, it would make it sexy and spicy if Rantanen somehow ends up back in the Western Conference.
No kidding.
Like Colorado, probably that wasn't in their plan.
Well, Chris McFarland, their GM, was asked about that a couple days ago, and he said, you can't make trades based on what ifs. Like, we're not calculating what what if we trade a special player like Mikko Rantanen and the Canes flip him somewhere? Like, it's not how it works.
No, and I think most people, when the Canes acquired him, Frank, thought, all right, there's their superstar. They've always wanted one. They're going to pay him. Away we go. And they did
go back and watch our YouTube video the night that they made the trade. It's one of the first things I said was, if they don't get him done, could they flip him?
Yeah. Well, that obviously is the top story because, and I wonder, do you think that slows down some of the other trades, Frank? Because the teams that are saying, hey, he's number one, so let's see if we can get him first, and then we'll go to the other ones. For the teams looking for forwards anyway.
I guess. I mean, I could understand why, but at the same time, he's only going one place. And unless you think that you've got a real credible offer, like, I think the last thing you want to do, especially if you're a team looking for a center, like, let's say you're the Leafs, okay? And you want to get in on Rantanen. What are you trading Carolina right now that's bringing you Rantanen?
Yeah, well, I saw people saying Matthew Nyes, and I'm like,
no chance.
No, I wouldn't do that. I like him a lot.
Not for 8 weeks of Rantanen. Like, no. I just, and I'm looking at the list of teams, like, and I'm thinking about his personality. I'm going, does he really want 7, 8 years of Toronto? I don't think so. Could be wrong, but I don't know. And yeah, so like Nyes, again, this is what the situation I've worked myself into with all these teams is what are you giving the Canes to want to bypass a run with Rantanen? And it's hard to come up with. So, it can't just be futures for Carolina, I wouldn't think. So that said, so the reason I brought up the Leafs was like, let's say you get entangled in the Rantanen thing, and then all of a sudden you turn around and Brock Nelson's in Winnipeg. And then you go, well, geez, we didn't really solve our center ice problem. And now we have Scott Laughton left.
Yeah.
Or now we're going to have to pay a significant price for Braden Shen. I don't get lost chasing the shiny toy is what I would advise. That's all.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, it was a fun live edition of the DFO Rundown, episode 364. Enjoy the final few hours, hockey fans, leading up to the trade deadline. I know it's anxious for the players, but it's lots of excitement for the fans, and it'll be very interesting to see come Friday afternoon, realistically probably 4 p.m. Eastern, by the time a lot of the deals officially get done, and we'll see who's improved and who's confident with their group. Should be a lot of fun. That's the rundown. Jason Gregor, Frank Seravalli is always brought to you by Bet365, also on behalf of Tyler Remchuk. Have a good one.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.